Okay, hello, good morning, year 8. So welcome back. Today you're going to be having your second lesson on the Haitian Revolution. Your title, if you could write it down in your books please, or at the top of your Word document is, why was Saint-Domingue described as the Pearl of the Antilles? And for your starter activity, I want you just to have a look at the images, starting from here, around anti-clockwise through here, these three images. They all show pearls, and I want you just to think, what sort of people wear pearls? What does wearing pearls signify in terms of status? So just pause the video, write your answer, and then resume when you've finished. Okay, so the second question I want you to consider is, why might France have described a place as its pearl? Now we're starting to think specifically about Saint-Domingue. Yeah? You can see here, this is the country of France, and this is its colony on the western third of the island of Hispaniola, known as Saint-Domingue. Why might France have described the place as its pearl? So some answers, common answers might be that pearls are valuable. They confer status on someone. They, represent wealth, and really that is why people in France describe, around the world, described the colony of Saint-Domingue as the pearl of the Antilles. Now the Antilles is just this collection of islands in the Eastern Caribbean there. Okay. Now, I did mention this word quite a bit in that explanation. I want you to write it down. It's your key word for today, and that is colony. Colony. Colony is a country or area under the control of people from another country. And we're going to be using and thinking about that term quite a bit during the course of this unit. That was the relationship that France had with Saint-Domingue. It was not part of France. It was its colony. It extracted wealth from there and used it to support its own economy. Right. So this is now our lesson focus as well, which is, why was Saint-Domingue described as France's pearl? And what we're going to do is we're going to do some investigating. And what I want you to do at this point now is go into the Teams folder, and I'd like you to open up this file here, Haiti worksheet, and you'll find these four descriptions: sugar, coffee, jobs, trade. And I want you to use that fact file to write an answer to this question. So these are the things that made Saint-Domingue so important to France, and made people describe it as its pearl. So have a look, analyze, explore, and write an answer to that question. And I want you to try to use some of these keywords as well in your answer, just so that you can make it sound a bit more sophisticated. So words like trade, economy, profits, jobs, exports, power, colony, and sugar. So just to give you a brief overview of why it was described as France's pearl, Saint-Domingue, so sugar and coffee were the two most profitable, valuable cash crops. Yeah, these are, you might come across them in geography. Cash crops are things that are grown which are not for daily survival, but are used to, make life a little bit more pleasant. That includes sugar. It's not an essential really, and coffee. The other cash crops would be things like tobacco, cotton, and so forth. Now, by 1790, which is just before the revolution takes place, Saint-Domingue was the world's largest producer of sugar. The colony produced about 45% of the world's sugar, which is a staggering figure considering how valuable this commodity was. It was one of the most in-demand goods. It symbolized wealth, and it was consumed with some of the new bitter drinks which were becoming popular in Europe, which had been imported from around the world, including tea in England and coffee in other parts of Europe. And by 1790, 50% of the world's coffee was made in Saint-Domingue. So if that wasn't enough, producing almost half the world's sugar, producing easily half the world's coffee was made it even more valuable, and it provided jobs and trade for France. So go through that and answer that question. I'm really looking for about 2, perhaps 3 paragraphs there if you can. Let's move on. Okay, so skip that. Okay, let's have a quick rundown of Saint-Domingue and how these things were made. I just told you sugar and coffee were incredibly profitable. Saint-Domingue's coffee and sugar was grown and harvested by about 500,000 slaves of African descent by 1790. The overall transatlantic slave trade accounted for about 12 million people were kidnapped and transported across the Atlantic from Africa to the Americas. About 1.2 million of that 12 million ended up in Saint-Domingue. This is only 1/3 of a relatively small island, so you can imagine how many, poor people, poor human beings ended up working on these plantations that you can see here. These are sugar plantations. This is a sugar cane. The conditions on Saint-Domingue, or all slave plantations, but in Saint-Domingue in particular, were so brutal that about 50% of the enslaved died within 3 years of arriving, which is a staggering number. Now you can just imagine what choices the planters, the plantation managers, these aren't plantation managers, these are overseers, but plantation manager would have been the person making all of the profits. They had a choice. They could have either improved conditions on these plantations, or they could have just bought more people to do the jobs that those who were dying and dead could no longer do, and they chose the second option, which just tells you something about the horrific conditions on some of these plantations. So now I want you just to draw up this table in your book. We're going to do some source analysis. Source A, and then leave a space for source B. Then what can you see? What did it tell you? And secondly, what does this suggest about slavery in Saint-Domingue? So this is source A. I want you now just to have a look at source A. So see a sugar cane crusher. So sugar, let me just go back to the image here. You can see grew in large canes, and when it was ripe, they would cut the cane, which is what they're doing there, and then the cane would be taken to crushing house, and then it would be, after it was crushed, the juices would be collected. And when the juices were collected, they would then be boiled. When the excess water was boiled off, it would leave the sugar crystals behind, which was then transported as something that resembles the sugar that you know today. But if you look here, this person here is feeding the cane through the machine to crush it, and the juices are collected below. Fairly straightforward job, unless you've been doing this for 18 hours, which was not uncommon during harvest season. And many enslaved people, very tired, very overworked, would not let go of the cane, and their hand would go through this machine. And so for that reason, that happens so often, in fact, that a machete, a large knife, would have been left by the machine to chop off any person's hand who'd already gone in. Horrific. Have a read through of that, and then I want you just to describe what you can see, and then in the second column explain what you think the source teaches. So what can you infer from this source about slavery? And these are just some of the things you can see there. Okay, next one. Source B, have a look through of it. It is it's written by a plantation manager, a white plantation manager named Devassier, French plantation manager, and he's describing how to punish the enslaved who do not work enough, or who disobeyed him for some reason. Very horrific account, and it's not for the squeamish, but it's important for us to understand how people were treated in order to understand why there was a revolution against this system in 1791. So do the same thing for that. Just what does it tell you? Very obviously, and then secondly, what you can infer, what you can learn about slavery from this source. So pause, complete, please. And here, some things that I've just written for you. Of course, it's not exhaustive. You can obviously add a lot more detail yourself. Okay.